when I hear you talk about commitment, I think about people committing to certainly relationships, but even small things like a warrior weekend, committing to being there, committing to spending the time and energy to do that. And it seems interesting to me that there's the distracted man that you've spoken about, 21st century distracted man thing, where our attention is pulled in all of these different directions, no focus. And so what would you say to could you speak to this a little bit in terms of maybe what is something that you see men take away from a weekend, something they maybe get from being in a weekend by making that kind of commitment?
Well, I mean, the essential thing that has gotten out of the weekend is precisely that, the different forms of commitment through relationship, right? So back in the old Sterling organization that I trained in back in the early 90s, one of the maxims that we always looked at was that questions like a Zen koan: are you in relationship, staying in relationship, right? Or are you disconnecting, right? So in a weekend, men get to look at the ways in which they disconnect all the time from men. And even in a Zoom weekend, it doesn't really change. It's the same thing. Because whether you're sitting in a room in 3 dimensions with a bunch of bodies, or whether you're looking at a screen connecting electronically, you're still connecting mentally one way or another, or not connecting, as the case may be. So part of the value of the weekend is for the guy to see his own internal strategies in terms of how he disconnects from other men, or what sort of thoughts he's having about other men. You remember the weekend we had when there was a guy there, who talked about how he was ranking everyone in the room, right? And this was one of the funnier moments we ever had, because he was so transparent with his judgments of what was going on for him, right? So this is another thing that happens. The man gets to see the ways in which he not just disconnects from other men, but the way he ranks himself, versus other men, and where he situates himself in the greater sense of the community of men, and his feelings around authority and authority figures, his sense of safety with men in terms of can he speak his truth about something or not, right? But in general, all he has to do is put himself in the soup, in the environment of being in the energy of that many men, which in our last one was 88 guys we had, and he's going to feel something. Stuff is going to come up, a lot of it which is coming from the unconscious mind. So he's not even necessarily aware that he had this stuff, right, inside of him until he puts himself in that situation. And our goal with men is always the same. We touch on this in the weekend, but it really gets looked at in the squads and the ongoing meetings, right? And the goal is reaching a place where you can be in the company of other men in a state of comfort. And there are, some technical terms for this, one of which, from the Sanskrit tradition, this term satsang, which means association with truth, sitting in the presence of truth. Now that is in a more spiritual, non-gender-based sort of context, but in men's work it's very similar in the sense of can you be in the presence of other men and be comfortable simply in that presence. Like one of the definitions we have of a good friendship is that you can be in silence with that person in a state of comfort. So if you can spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes walking on the beach with a friend, and neither side has said anything, and you're feeling comfortable, that's a sign of a deep connection, right? Because usually we fill up the space with words to cover up our anxiety or what have you. In men's work, it happens like that in the very specific context of being just with other men, right? So any unfinished business that a guy has with brothers, with his father, with any history in his family system relating to how men were regarded, and his self-image as a man tends to get provoked once he's in the presence of other men for no other purpose than waking up, right? Because men are so used to getting together, centering their purpose for getting together around an object. They're there to talk about something or talk about business or sports or a person or a woman or a man or what have you, and they're not talking about the one thing that they need to look at, which is their presence with each other. Right? This is the one thing that gets ignored. So in men's work, that's the one thing that is addressed, right? Is simple presence with each other.